The unhinged where nothing is hidden. We talking so get in.
Listen.
The unhinged where nothing is hidden. We talking so get in.
Listen.
Mary, blah, blah.
Show.
Mary, blah, blah.
Show.
The unhinged where nothing is hidden. We talking so get in.
Listen.
The unhinged where nothing is hidden. We talking so get in.
Listen.
Mary, blah, blah.
Show.
Mary, blah, blah.
Show.
Welcome to The Unhinged, a Mary Blige show. It is estimated that at least 1 in 7 children in the U.S. has experienced child abuse and/or neglect in the past year. Adult survivors of childhood abuse are more likely to experience mental health difficulties, including depression, anxiety, bipolar disorder, PTSD, eating disorders, and substance use disorders. I'm your host, Mary Blige, and I am 1 in 7. Today's guest is Natalie Mosley Klenotic. Natalie is a former United States Navy widow and #1 best-selling author. Natalie was widowed at age 21 while tragically on board her husband's ammunition supply vessel, the USS Flint, in Oakland, California in 1993. Her first book was a memoir discussing her marriage to her sailor, her teenage life with him, her abusive childhood, and their beautiful paranormal experience that occurred after his death. See You Later, Life Calling Me From Beyond, a memoir, was published October 2023, and her children's book, Daddy's Not Gone, was published in December 2023. She has been featured on the front page of her local newspaper, the Greenfield Daily Reporter, for her generous donations of her children's book around her home state of Indiana and across the United States. It continues to reach children who need it via funeral homes, child care services, and hospitals. She is a public speaker discussing the paranormal and her childhood abuse while living with narcissistic parents. She dove back into her abusive childhood and eventual widowhood to write her third book. Her thriving nature assists her during her traumas, puzzling some while inspiring others. She has finally decided to share her thriving abilities with the world. Down the rabbit hole of narcissism, Life Under NARC Attack will dissect her method of survivability. She is authentic in telling about being a survivor of physical, mental, and emotional abuse at the hands of family members. Being a cycle breaker is not for the weak. The narcissistic bullying behavior and abuse has ended for her. Both of her narcissistic parents abandoned her repeatedly, ultimately leading to their walking out of her life for good. Her life experiences helped her create a book unlike any other. She will guide you and introduce you to the many definitions that abuse survivors have come to learn in present day. So welcome to the show, Natalie.
Hi, Mary. How are you?
Good. How are you?
Doing all right.
It's been a minute since I haven't heard from you. At the last time you were on the last podcast we did, told us the story of Tom and how he showed you what real love was. So today's topic, we're going to get into the new book called Down the Rabbit Hole of Narcissism, Life Under NARC Attack. And that's a book that's coming out, I believe, this month, right? In June?
Yes. It's
Okay.
going to come out on June 14th, and it's actually available for pre-order now, the digital book.
Okay. So in this book, you talk about your parents, how they were physically abusive towards you and they were narcissists. So I'm going to let you go ahead and take us back to when you were a child and what that looked like for you and what life was during those times.
Thank you. Well, growing up in the 70s and 80s, I didn't have the word narcissism then. And I didn't know what a narcissist was. I didn't know what triangulation was. I didn't know. I just knew that I had parents that to me seemed very selfish. And I say this because they were clearly going through their own things, probably from their childhoods, right? They had fairly abusive childhoods, not my mother, but my father, not physical abuse, but he was the one and only child that his mother kept from his father. He never knew. So my father was born, he was the oldest, and she went on to have child after child after child after child. And she would give them all away, but she would keep him. And she had mental illness, and she would be gone. And my mother is adopted. So she would tell me her stories of how she never felt loved by her mother, and she felt desperately alone her whole childhood. And both of those two people met. They met and they got married. And they got married under a kind of a dark veil. In their small town, my father, they knew that he had a bunch of siblings that had been given away, right, for adoption. My mother's adopted. So that town wove these dark secrets and said that my mother was actually his sister and that he had met and married her. And that is the beginning of their marriage.
Wow.
So it starts out fairly ugly. And
Yeah.
I was born about a year later. My mom got married at 18, clearly because she wanted to get out of her own home. And they had me, and I don't remember them ever being a happy couple. By the time I could form sentences, it was just not happy in my home. A lot of arguing, a lot of, I say screaming fights, but it was my father that screamed and was loud and abusive and aggressive and ugly. He was a man that would belittle you. If he knew something bothered you, he would use it. He did that method with my mother. And then as soon as I was old enough, he did the same thing to me. He began to make fun of my ears. He began to make fun of my overbite. He began to make fun of, I always had long arms and long legs. I was a very tall child. So he would dig in on me and make fun of me with those things. And that has stuck with me my whole life, unfortunately. He created insecurities. He created a very solitary household. We were not allowed to have opinions. We couldn't talk back and say like, hey, stop hitting me, or hey, stop, this is horrible, stop arguing with me, or I didn't do anything wrong. Mm-hmm. And I didn't know that's what narcissists do. As I got older, I educated myself, and he is the textbook narcissist. He loved to pit us against each other. I don't have a relationship with my brother. My father decided years ago when I had a child, and my daughter said something to my brother that he didn't like a girlfriend that he was with. Behind my back, my father decided to tell my brother that I actually didn't like the girlfriend, and that my daughter had said that only because I had. That's what narcissists do. My brother believed him, and we haven't spoken since. My mother would come to me and cry to me. I can remember being 4 years old, and she would be crying, and I would be soothing her and patting her back and telling her everything would be okay. And she would always say, I'm going to leave. This is the time. I'm going to leave. We're not going to stay. He can't keep treating me like this. And I listened, right, as a child, consoling her. Never did it go as a two-way street. My mother never said, I'm so sorry he's doing this to you. I'm so sorry that we're living like this. I wish he would stop hitting you. That never happened.
So, Natalie, how old were you when you were having to console your mother?
Well, I can remember being, the first time I remember being in a hotel, her MO eventually became she would take me and my brother and we'd run off to a hotel. I can tell you every hotel right now that I stayed at as a child with my mother. Mm-hmm. And I can remember being 4 years old at our old house when I was 4 years old and patting her back and saying, Mommy, it'll be okay. Every time we would go to a hotel and my brother was born, we're 6 years different. So the earliest, I think it was 7 with him. And I can remember us tucking him into bed. I mean, think about that. I'm 7. Mm-hmm. We're putting him into a bed. And then my mother and I would talk the rest of the night about all of her problems and how sad she was and wanting to get us out of there. And I would lay down to go to sleep. She would get me up the next morning. She would get me changed at home. We would go back home and she would put me on the school bus. Like nothing.
That's a lot. That's a lot of responsibility for a 7-year-old child to. So my then husband, who's passed away, he's the father of my children.
Right.
We always had this thing where we would never argue in front of the kids. They didn't need to know our business. They didn't need to know any financial stuff. They didn't need to know if we were going through anything ourselves. We shielded our kids from that, but that stuff wasn't shielded from us when we were kids. So in that sense, I can relate to some of those things as a child. I think that's so unfair, and it's sad that that is put on a 7-year-old child. You basically, what it sounds like is that you became the adult.
I was very old from a young age. My father, you've heard the phrase, an old soul. My father used to call me an old soul when I was very, very small. He would say, "You are an old soul. I know you know things." And I would not understand then. And I'd be like, "Yeah, I'm super mature. Like, I am old." No, it's because I was seeing everything. I would see every fight. I would hear every fight. My mother one time, and she says this is blocked out from her mind. When she would take us to the hotels, we would escape for a night and it'd be fine, come back, it'd be calmed down. One time she tried to go without us. And she ran out the front door and was crying. And I'm like, "Aren't you taking me with you?" Because that's how it usually worked. And she, "Get you a room. Well, my father saw me and he ran outside after her. And at that time we had a gravel drive. And I remember him grabbing her by the hair out of her car and dragging her back up the driveway. And he threw her down the hallway. About, 10 years later, when she and I thought we were commiserating over my being, now at this time, when I'm commiserating years later as a teenager, I'm talking about, I don't like how my father's hitting me and he's hurting me and he fractured my ribs and I can't do this anymore. And I said, "Remember when he drug you in the house?" And, I was like, "That's horrible." And she goes, "That never happened." And I was, "No, I saw it. I saw it happen." And she, "No, that never happened. I don't know what you're talking about."
So does your mom deny a lot of the stuff?
She did deny it for a very long time. She and I could talk privately and she would admit it. That was the first time. I don't know if she had it blocked or if she just wanted to deny it because it was so desperately ugly. Like it was ugly. She was bruised and scraped and crying and it was horrible. Years later, after I got married to my first husband, Tom, she and I would talk occasionally about our old abuses. And she began to deny them and say it wasn't that bad. That never happened. I don't know what you're talking about. Quit talking about your father like that. No wonder your brother doesn't like you because you're making all this stuff up. She completely was calling me a liar. My husband dies. I come back. Years go by. I get remarried and we get on social media. And I decided this is it. Now's the time. I'm going to start telling people that I was abused. And, abuse is not just physical. I think people, and my mother included, tends to think we weren't punched in the face on a daily basis. We weren't, smacked around. It was emotional and mental torture living there. His attitude could flip like a light switch. He could be happy and, cutting up with us and laughing with us and having fun. And if he felt laughed at or ganged up on, he would switch. And you could see it in his face. And he would torture me. He was the meanest man I've ever met. Mean. And so when I started talking to my mother about that, I decided,
so sad.
Yeah, I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to finally tell people what I think needs to be known. It shouldn't have to be a secret. My parents threatened to sue me. They sent a letter and said they were getting an attorney. And that if I kept telling this stuff, because it was lies, that they were going to sue me. And I told and they didn't send it to me. They sent it to my husband at work because they know how I would have reacted. They are not going to send that to me. And so I said, it's not lies if it's the truth. If it's what happened, it's not a lie. I'm not defaming you. I'm not demeaning you. It's the truth. And that was a turning point for me. They literally did me a favor by sending me that letter, because then I realized it's over. My mother really does believe that none of this happened now. It's over. She's taken his side and she's blocking it out or she doesn't want to acknowledge it anymore. She's embarrassed by it. I'm not embarrassed by it. I was abused. I was tortured in that house, and I will talk about it.
Good for you. I'm glad that you are speaking your truth and letting that out. So let me get my glasses on because I do have something. I was researching some of this, and it says that adult survivors of childhood abuse are more likely to experience mental health difficulties, including depression, anxiety, bipolar disorder, PTSD, eating disorders, and substance use disorders. But none of that happened for you. How is it that you, first of all, that must have been hell living like that as a child. And I'm sorry that you had to go through that. That's absolutely horrible. I feel like no child, should ever have to experience any of that ever. And I get too verbal, I guess, or open sometimes on the shows. And so people don't come for me. I'm saying the truth. And y'all guys out there know that I'm saying the truth. No child should ever have to do that. So that's one thing I wanted to say. But Natalie, you met Tom and he showed you a different way of what love was and what true love really was. And do you think that because of that, your life went a different way, meaning you didn't go through any of the, I'm sure you have PTSD. Have you had any of that? But you didn't do drugs. You didn't do promiscuous stuff or anything like that. So do you think that was a turning point when you recognized what love really was from somebody?
My parents never told me they loved me. I've never heard the words, I love you, from my parents. Now,
That's sad.
Said it the first time 2 months ago when she saw that my book was coming out. I don't consider that her telling me she loves me. She's only saying that because she's now seen me on social media saying I've never been told that. Not once as a child did anyone hug me in my home. We had no loving expression. I was numb. And I do think that's part of the reason I never was promiscuous. I didn't do drugs. I didn't drink in high school. I didn't do any of that. Honestly, I was too terrified. If I ever did any of that and my father found out, he would have, and I say murdered me, he would have murdered me. You have to be perfect for a narcissist. They don't have the same rules for themselves. My father was an alcoholic. He would go through a case of beer in a weekend, 24 beers in a weekend. But the same rules for him didn't follow through for his children. He did the same type of mental work on my brother as well, but I'm not close to him, so I can't say how he is or how he coped. But I was too afraid to do any of that stuff. If I had ever done any of that stuff, I would have been murdered. And besides that, I didn't want to be what he thought I was always going to be, right? He used to compare me to my mother, and I don't know what my mother did to him. I don't know what happened in their relationship before me, but he would also compare me to his mother and say, you're just like my mother. You're just like your mother. You're all the same. And I didn't want to be that. Whatever that mysterious was, I didn't want to be it. I wasn't going to cheat. I wasn't going to do nasty stuff. I kept my nose clean. I stayed a straight A student, A, B student. I wanted to get out of that house. I knew college was the answer for me to get out. So I think that's a huge part of what motivated me before I met Tom. I knew college was my ticket out. So I was in the top 10 of my class. I had to get out of there. I had to make sure that I escaped when I was 18. But then I met my boyfriend. My boyfriend came along when I was 15. And this young man was very unusual. He was only 16 years old. And he could tell that I was scared to go home at certain times. I would rather we would go to the mall. I didn't want to go home. I wouldn't tell him why. And slowly he pulled these stories out of me. And when I told him that no one loved me in my house, that I felt desperately alone, and that I hid in my bedroom most of the time, I didn't interact. I would eat dinner and I would go hide in my room because outside of my room was too scary. So when I started telling him these stories slowly, and he's learning, and I'm telling him how I'm hit all the time and how I'm belittled, and he was the one that really opened my eyes. I knew it wasn't normal. You know, it's not normal. It's not right.
Yeah.
but it's so much a part of your life. It's your normal.
Right.
That you lose touch with how crazy it really is at your house. And that young man told me, he goes, you know what? I love you and I'm here for you and I'm going to help you get out of here. We're going to both get out of here. And so much so, when I wrote my first book, I began looking through our old love letters and, different things from him. And I opened our yearbook. And in the yearbook, it literally says at the bottom by his name, someone really does love you. And that just is proof. I was always saying, no one loves me. I'm not lovable. I'm doing something wrong. I'm really ugly. And he used to get so mad at me and say, stop saying that you're ugly. Well, why do you say that all the time? And I think he thought it was a teenage girl thing, like looking for trying to tell me I'm cute or how good I look. No, I really felt desperately ugly. I really felt hideous. And he helped me through that. He showed me that I was beautiful inside and out. And he would apologize for my parents and say, I'm so sorry they're treating you like that. And I'm so sorry you have to live like that. This is not normal. And I don't know where I would be without him. If I had not gotten into college and I didn't have a him and I found some other horrible guy, right, that feeds into that like my narcissistic father does, narcissists want a weaker mate. They want someone that rolls along with whatever they do and however they treat people. And he found a perfect mate in my mother. She allowed it. And if I had found a guy like my father, I don't know what would have happened, right? I would think that I would fight back and not let that happen, but I only know why I am the reason I am now, and that's thanks to Tom. It really is.
That's good. I'm glad that, I know I've told you previously before, but I'm, say it again, I'm so glad that you found Tom and you were able to feel and know what real love was, because we as children, we remember all the bad things and we remember specific details, where we were, what we were doing, what day it was, what night, because I remember when I was 5 years old and I was sick, and I grew up in the 70s. I was born in 70. So I remember being sick.
So, yep.
Okay. And I remember being sick, and we were living in Lubbock at the time, my father, my mother, and myself. And I remember we lived in an efficiency type apartment. I was sick that morning, and my dad, it was still light out, and there was a window by where the bed was at. So there was a tall window. Okay. So the street lights were still on. So it was still dark. So I'm guessing it was early morning. He was getting ready to go to work. And I remember telling my dad, I don't want you to go. I love you. And he goes, I have to go to work. And he gave me cough medicine. And I can't remember the name of it, but I think I still remember what it tastes like, even right now as I'm describing it to you. Right. But it was like Formula 44 is what that was back.
They tasted so bad, so bad.
I know, but I still remember what that was. I remember he gave me that, and I was whining and I was crying because I didn't feel good. I was sick. And my dad wasn't abusive, but my mother didn't physically abuse me. But I remember that I wouldn't be quiet. And I remember her telling me to shut up. I hate you. And I wish you were never born. And I was 5 years old, and I remember that to this day. So I don't have a really great relationship with my mother. And everything, as growing up, I'm 5 years older than my sister. I don't have a good relationship with her either. My mom always had us basically where everything was for her. Everything needed to be for her.
The golden child.
Right.
I was the scapegoat or the black sheep, and my brother is the golden child. So... Yep.
Yeah, everything was for her. School came around. Everybody, she would get new clothes. I had to get hand-me-downs. I was probably like 10 years old, and I learned from my grandmother. My grandma was petite, but I was still like a young child. But I learned how to sew her pants to fit me, because I never got new stuff. My sister always got new stuff. So it was things like that. Even as an adult, it's still that way. And my aunt one day noticed that and says, hey, why don't we do something for your birthday? Because it was my sister's birthday that day. And I went in there, and I'm always cordial. I'll always say, hi, Mom, how are you? I love you.
Yeah.
And that's okay. But every time she tells me that, I feel it's fake. So you never had that. And I did, but it was fake.
Fake. But it didn't feel genuine.
Because it was always around other people.
Know when it's not genuine. You know as an adult when it's not genuine, but kids know it's not genuine as well. I totally understand.
Yeah. So anyways, but we remember people, okay? So don't treat your kids like that. Please don't, because so I have a few questions to ask you. So I feel like you already answered this, but now, so I'm going to ask now. I know you don't really have a relationship with your mom, but you're kind of on social media. Does she or your parents, do you feel that they still try to manipulate you?
You know, that's a great question. She tries, right? We haven't talked. She hasn't spoken to me in 13 years. My father decided to skip my daughter's high school graduation because we weren't speaking. I should say we weren't speaking. My father's a pro at the silent treatment. That is his MO. I've been ignored probably since the age of 5 or 6 years old. He would give you the silent treatment and he would just stop talking to you. And I wouldn't know why, but that's what happens. So he stopped speaking to me. So he didn't come to my daughter's graduation, but I thought my mother would and my brother would. Neither one showed up. So Hannah was upset. She didn't cry, but she was upset. And I said, that's it. That is literally it. Like, I have dealt with this for decades. How dare they not show up for your high school graduation? Like, put whatever, I don't know what you have against me. Go see your granddaughter graduate high school. It hurt her. So I called my mother and I spoke to her. And I said, what is going on? Why didn't you show up? So the manipulation begins. She starts to say, well, your dad wasn't going to go, so I decided I shouldn't go. And the first thing she says after that, what does Bill think of us? My husband. Doesn't care that my daughter's upset. Doesn't say, oh, how is Hannah? Tell her I'm sorry. Put her on the phone. Let me talk to her. I'll fix this. Or, I'm sorry, Natalie. What is wrong with me? What is so wrong with me that I have to follow your dad's lead my entire life and not be my own person and show up? Doesn't happen. Well, your dad didn't show, so I didn't want to go, and I do have to feed the dogs. And so I said, tell me what is going on. What is wrong that you can't talk to me? What have I ever done that is so wrong, except say, we should have never been abused. We shouldn't have been treated like that. He's a horrible person. Why is that wrong? And I'm labeled the bad guy that you won't go see your granddaughter's graduation because of that. Well, you're right. You're right. I really, I don't know why I do the things I do. I don't know why I listen to him. But why am I the bad guy, Mom? What did I do? What did I ever do? I had straight A's in school. I was a good girl. I got married. I moved out to California with my husband. My husband died. I kept it together. I never turned to drugs or alcohol. I never did anything horrible. I kept it together. What did I do? Well, your brother really can't stand you. And so it turns into this whole excuse, manipulation. It just turns into all this, she won't take accountability for anything. She will not say, yes, some of this is my fault. I don't know why I didn't protect you. I don't know why I didn't. She's just, I don't know. And, what does Bill think? And I said, who cares what Bill thinks? Who cares? Yeah. What do I think, Mom? What does Hannah think? Well, I'm going to come over. I'm going to come see you and I'm going to fix this. She shows up. She cries for 30 minutes. And I'm such a moron. I am like, I'm 4 years old. I'm patting her back and I'm like, it'll be okay. And we're going to fix it. And she's like, okay, I'm going to make this the best summer for all 3 of your kids. We're going to hang out. I'm going to see them more. I promise. That's it. She did. So nothing happened. Wow. Nothing happened. Never showed back up. Never called me. She manipulated me into feeling bad for her. On the day she skipped my daughter's high school graduation, she manipulated and worked me to feel bad for her. So yes, she used to manipulate me. When my book came out, the See You Later book came out.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I'm so excited. I see you wrote a book, and oh, I can't wait to read it. And I can't wait to give you hugs. And I love you so much. And I said, quit saying all that. Quit saying that you suddenly love me. Quit telling me that you want to hug me. You've never hugged me. Well, it'll be worth all the hugs. It'll be worth all the hugs. We're going to work through this. I'm reading self-help books. I'm going to get help. I'm reading and reading. Okay, Mom, but I want you to read my book. I want you to read the book first, because you might feel some kind of way when you read it, because I told some truths in it. I think she thought the book was just going to be about my husband dying.
Mm-hmm.
And initially I did think that when I wrote it as well, but as you start to write that stuff, your own stuff starts to come out.
Yeah.
And it spilled out of me all over in the book. And my gosh, it felt so much better to get so much of it out. I don't know if she read the book. She never said. The only thing she ever said was that, you know, I'm free, I'm done, and then called me a crybaby. Manipulative, very manipulative. And I just basically just said, bye. You're not manipulating me anymore. I'm done. I'm out.
And I think that's the sad, well, a lot of it, all of this is horrible, first of all, for, like I said, for a child to go through it. But now you got children, and now they're receiving that from the grandparents. My children, when my kids were younger, they would go to my mom's. You know, we would all go like for Christmas or whatever, and there were pictures, tons of pictures of my sister and all her kids for the longest time. And it's not like she never was giving pictures, because we would give her pictures of school pictures and stuff like that.
Right.
You know, I got tired of lying for her.
Right.
When my kids became old enough to say, how come grandma doesn't have pictures of us? I would turn around and say, I don't know. Why don't we go ask her? Because it's about time you need to ask her, and she needs to give you an answer, because I kept lying and lying. I don't know. I don't think I gave her, I made myself to look bad when the whole time I was giving her photos. And my kid, it's sad that that Hannah or your children don't have a relationship with their grandparents. Mine don't either, because of things like that.
But you know what? For a while when my kids were little and they were seeing their grandparents, and there would be little, interactions with them, it was wonderful. But they weren't the same people. They were grandparents to my children. Those were not the people I grew up with. They were not that, this sweet and kind, and that's not what I had. So that was okay at the time, because they had different people. But then slowly little things would happen, and Hannah would tell me how my father had screamed at her or yelled at her. And over time I realized, you know what, it really is better to not have them in their life than to have them eventually. I've heard from so many people that their parents, the narcissistic grandparents, eventually poison your children, just like they did my brother. And I was like, if I had that happen, I don't know that I could keep it together. My kids are my everything. You place me in front of that train that's heading, towards them, and I will take the hit. I will not let anything happen to my children. And I'd rather have the relationships that I have with my kids the way it is without my parents than have them back in the picture. It was too much drama and nonsense all the time anyway. It wasn't worth it.
Yes, get it. So the other thing that I wanted to ask is that, getting from the conversation. So when you were younger, did your parents only do things for you when others could see, to make it come off to other people like, oh, we're all good and we take care of, Natalie?
Yes.
They did.
And I have to say it wasn't all the time. I'd say it's probably 75% look good and 25% was just, we did have fun together. It wasn't all terrible. I think people think when you're like bad mouthing and finally decide to speak your so-called truth when you're older about how it really was, it wasn't all terrible. We did have vacations. We did have family holidays. I did have lots of things, but I was not happy. I was desperately sad. I was not loved. No one came in and tucked me in at night and said, I love you so much. You're so great. But I had a friend that I grew up with that called my family the Cleavers, as in Beaver Cleaver. She said, your family is so nice. Your dad is so funny. And your mom, gosh, she's always cooking. And you have like the best family. And I was thinking, are you kidding me? I was like, and it was all a show. It was all a scam. It was all for appearances. We would go and visit. My dad had these lifelong friends, the Pools. We would go every other weekend. And those boys would say, my gosh, your parents are so great. Like, you guys are all so nice and so happy. And I would get home and be like, well, where are those people? Because they're gone. Like, get the house.
They're not here.
They're not here. That's not true. So there is some truth to that. It is, and it is. My mother is still that way. It's all about appearances. Has to look good. My parents wear masks, big time. And my mother, 2 days after my book went #1, she decided to start feeding the homeless and posting about it on social media. So they're always working it. They're always wanting to make sure, like, hey, that's not me. I don't do that.
Yeah. But if you're doing something for somebody like that, you're doing it because it's coming from the kindness of your heart and you really do care about them. You don't post that all on social media for the whole world to see so you can get glorified for it.
Right. I totally agree.
How do you, breaking the cycle from that for how did you do that? Like, what is it that what are the techniques that you're doing to break that cycle?
It's funny. When I met my boyfriend in high school, again, I was fairly smart in school. I was a bit of a nerd. So I used to tell him, fight the DNA. I would say, you know what? I'm going to fight that DNA. I don't care that it's in me and it's flowing in me. I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to be like these people. I would teasingly say, fight the DNA. We're going to fight the DNA. That's where it began for me. I had the wherewithal and the sight to see these were broken people. And these were people that are enacting clearly something they've got going on inside on everybody around them. My dad, this is not an excuse for him by any means. My mother had the gall to tell me, you know what, my mother never loved me. Well, it hurts, doesn't it? Hurts to not be loved, doesn't it? Well, my mom never told me she loved me. Oh, really? Mine either. Wow. So I knew enough, and they're saying those things. They had no empathy for what I was going through. They were so into their abuses and their narcissism. I was never going to be like that. So it did start at a very young age for me that I'm not going to do this to my children. I'm not going to treat my child like this. And the part that only ever makes me cry when I would write my book is if I could imagine my daughter going through any of that. That's what gets me emotional. If my daughter had to go through any of that, that's the only time I ever get emotional. I don't get emotional when I think about it for myself as a little girl going through all of it. When I see my little girl and think that my dad could beat her like that or make her have an injury so bad that she has to go to the hospital, that's when it bothers me. But it was me that went through all of that. Those were my experiences. And in writing this next book, I finally realized this book is for that little girl, me. This book is for me so that other people can read it and learn from it and see how I do work through it. I always have the foresight to step outside of it. And I'm like, okay, why did this just happen? Okay, this is probably why it happened. And here's what I need to do to keep going. And I just keep going.
That's tough. That's real tough, Natalie. You don't want your kids to go through that because you yourself know exactly how it feels. And I don't, my kids, I said, no matter what, I'm going to tell them I love them. Some like to hug, some don't, and that's fine. No problem. And they're raising their children too. Like, it's okay to say no if you don't want to hug, especially now with all the, well, it's always been, but boundary. It's a boundary thing, but that's sad. That really makes me sad too, to think about those things. But this is why why I wanted to do this show, to bring awareness to these things, that there are people out there that are going through something and they can overcome that and redirect, or like you said, fight the DNA. I love that.
Right.
Fight the DNA. It's like fight the power, fight the DNA.
Right. Yeah.
You don't want to.
I have stickers of it too, just for when I go selling the books. I'm like, yeah, you can do it.
Fight that DNA. That's for sure. I wanted to ask you, what do you, I don't think that there's a message that you can give to narcissists. They're not going to listen to you. They're not going to listen to us. But for a teenager that's going through this, like, what would your message be to them?
You know what? As a teenager, I always felt so alone and so helpless. And I felt like if I ever told anyone in the school or administration that this was going on, that nothing would happen. Nothing would happen. And it's probably true back then. Nothing would have happened to my father. But tell somebody. Tell someone. And you never know who you're telling. Maybe that friend's parent is a police officer, or they know a police officer, or they know someone in the school administration. Tell someone. I lived quietly and privately because I was threatened to stay quiet. Tell someone and get help. You're not alone. You may feel alone, but you're never so alone that you can't tell someone. Maybe just tell your best friend. You tell your best friend, like my boyfriend became my best friend, and it changed my whole life. Then I realized that, you know what? I'm not the bad thing in this family. I'm not the one that's wrong. They are. They are the things that are wrong. Find someone you can talk to, an adult, a friend. If you feel you're strong enough to go to someone at your school and the administration, or a police officer, if it's that bad, do it. Do it while you're young, and don't wait until you're my age and have to write a book to weed your way through all of it to feel better. Do it. Talk to someone.
That's good. And I really hope that people listen out there. It's saying that it's estimated, I was reading again last night, it's estimated that at least 1 in 7 children in the U.S. had experienced abuse in the past year. So 1 in 7. That's a lot of people. That's a lot of children.
And yet you're probably, that one is feeling like this isn't happening to anyone else, right? You don't know. And after I've begun writing these books and telling my story, and just for a few examples, I've had classmates reach out to me and say, I grew up the same way. I had the same things happening to me. And these were friends. These were people I was hanging out with on a regular basis. And we didn't tell each other. We didn't share it. And all of us have said, gosh, if we had only told each other, we should have said, like, hey, here's what's going on at my house. What's going on at your house? And then we could have had each other, but we didn't. We stayed quiet. And I do think if I had some girlfriends that were going through the same thing, it would have made me feel a little stronger a little bit sooner. And I wouldn't have felt so numb. I mean, desperately numb for years.
What do you think that was, that we didn't tell each other those things, that it wasn't spoken about last?
You know what? I used to think it was because I was embarrassed that I was being abused. But the older I got, I think it's because I was embarrassed that I didn't want people to know I had parents that did that kind of thing. It's not that I was embarrassed that I was being treated so badly, which is horrible in itself. I was embarrassed because I didn't want people to know I had horrible parents. Because again, it's all a facade. It's all got to look good. I didn't want to be the girl that had these parents that I was going home and her dad was hitting her and smacking her around and telling her she was worthless. And I didn't want people to know that about me. So I don't know if that's the same thing maybe when you were young, or maybe it's the time we were in, because I know everybody shares literally everything now.
It was embarrassing, as I was embarrassed. Yeah, it was embarrassing because I didn't have physical abuse like that. I was sexually molested as a child for a long time.
Sorry.
And so this is why, again, I do this podcast to talk about these things, because I can relate
Oh.
to a lot of people out there about a lot of different things. But
Next level, that's terrible.
yeah, and it's just something that's embarrassing. And I mean, you don't talk about those things. And the physical abuse, I'm guessing we don't, that's not talked about either because of embarrassment, or you're scared that, I mean, if you tell somebody, then that means that your parents are going to find out that you told somebody. And so
Right.
I think in my head, for me, it was more like, if I tell somebody, right, it's the consequences. If I tell somebody, they're going to find out, then what's he going to do to me?
And I thought that too. That's kind of what I was saying, in that I thought if I told somebody, nothing would have happened to my father. They wouldn't have done anything, but then I would have had hell to pay. It would have been horrible to tell anyone. There was, no way I was going to be hurt like that, and then hurt even more because I had told someone. Mm-hmm. It was unimaginable. So yeah, you're absolutely right. And I'm so sorry. And I don't know why we as a whole back then really didn't talk about it besides being embarrassed. Like, I never told a friend. I never confided in a friend. I had all these friends that I'm sure they're reading the book and they're like, what the, like, I didn't know it. What?
Natalie? Like, we knew her. How is that not? How did we not know?
How did we not see that? But it's about being secretive, right? It's about keeping that secret. And I'm not keeping them anymore. I'm not doing it.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. I didn't, with my children, I told them, the truth. I always try to tell them the truth because I want them to know that this does exist, and to not to go do certain things that I did. Or when you in a relationship with somebody who is a narcissist, you'll know the signs. You'll try to get out. And if not, call me. I'll be there I'll be there ready to kick some ass.
Yes.
My children know that if anything went down, that's the first person they're calling is mama. And then we're all coming.
Yeah, mom is it. It's the same thing in our household. My kids know, like, dad'll be there, but call mom. You really want something to get done? Like, she will. Yeah. And I've had people say, like, you're scary. Like, because I can go down. I can get angry. If you're going to touch my child, it's not going to be pretty. So, and when I wrote the See You Later book, I had told stories about my dad hurting me, my whole life. My kids knew all about it. Mm. And when they read the book, well, they did not, none of my children actually read the book. I should say that, because they say it's too hard to see what mom went through, and it hurts them. But the parts that they have read through, they're like, Mom, why didn't you tell us it was Nana too? We didn't know it was Nana too. All this time we thought it was just Papa. And I'm like, oh no. It was Nana too. Like, she was there through all of it and did absolutely nothing. So, and they're like, gosh, Mom, like, you didn't have any parents. I'm like, no, not really. No, I didn't. And I still don't. So they're perfectly living up to who they should be. Oh,
so I need a minute. That's that's tough, because the way that we grew up back then is different now. And I think that everything that we've been through, I'm glad that you're able to be honest with your children about, and I'm glad that I can speak to my children, and my children know all about everything that happened to me. We have that, that communication where we can openly talk about these things,
right.
Which is something we didn't have back then. We didn't have that. Like you just said, you had friends that read your book that didn't even know that you were going through something, or they were going through something. Yeah. It's crazy.
And the thing is like, I would go to school and then I would be bullied there. I had bullies at school, a couple of bullies there too. So it was a never ending circle for me some days. Like, so it would be really ugly. And locally, I don't know if you've read the story, there's a little boy in my hometown that killed himself last week.
I did.
Over bullying. And you know what? And I honestly, I hate being that person. I don't like to, that's a tragedy. It's heartbreaking. And I can't even imagine being those parents right now. I really can't. Right. But when you read something like that, it's hard not to think of yourself if you were bullied. And I read that and I thought, you know what? My life was such a shit show at home. If I had not been as strong as I was, that could have been me.
Yeah.
because I would go to school, be bullied, come home, be bullied at home. It didn't end some days. It never ended. And, you know, it's a serious topic, and I don't think that it's taken serious enough. Parents are bullies too. My father was a gigantic bully. And it's a sad topic. It's such a sad topic. And I don't think people talk about that enough either. They really need to.
Yeah, that's true. What do you think? I don't have young children. My children are grown already, are adults. So I don't know what the education is like in the school systems. If they teach anti-bullying, do they do that?
You know, our town now, because of this happening, the articles, even in People magazine with this poor family. Mm-hmm. Now we're getting these inundated with, we're going to talk to the students. Oh, we're going to crack down on it. We're really going to do something this time. Listen, my daughter was bullied as well. This girl was bullying my daughter so badly that I drove to the school and I said, I'm going to be there. I'm going to be there and let her bully you. And I'm going to be there. I watched this girl nearly hit my daughter with a car.
Oh my gosh.
Got out of the car. I went immediately into the school. They literally, this is the same school system, by the way, that this little boy was in. They told me they could not do anything unless they had actually seen it. I was like, I saw it. Other students saw it. It just happened. Come outside. We can't do anything unless we witness it. Do you have cameras? Well, our cameras really aren't that good. So I don't know what they're going to do. I don't know how they can fix this when we have a superintendent that makes a statement and says that these parents didn't submit a form about bullying. Of course they did. It's been going on for months. This poor young man was bullied relentlessly.
Yeah.
So still, I think they take some action with the administration. I don't think anything's really going to change. Sadly, I don't.
And that's the problem. That's what I've been learning with different topics that we've been touching on this podcast, that it's a problem like in every area. I don't understand how they want, let me just not say it.
Yeah.
However, I just don't understand.
I don't either.
What the system and how it's working, what they're thinking, because, you know, if there were systems in place, I feel like back then, maybe somebody an educator or something would have seen some signs of physical abuse that you were having and, you know, would have said something. But this, you know, nobody had education and knew anything about it. And here we are now in this time, and we still don't have the damn education.
Bullied me were from 7th grade until my senior year. And they bullied at a very small school. My class was the largest class to come through that school at that time. And I graduated in 1990. And we had a class, I think it was 120 students. It's a very small school. Those boys probably bullied 100 students. They bullied dozens of children in multiple grades, and the administration knew about it. They never did anything. They didn't do anything. They knew. I met students and friends later on in reunions. Every single one of them told me they were bullied by those young men as well. So nothing happened. The administration knew. I was in a very small school. Everyone knew that these boys were doing this to these kids, and they didn't do anything. So
that's sad.
Back to my topic, and then I'm going to go to those people and tell them that I'm being abused? Heck no. No. They weren't going to help me, even if I told anyone. And when my mother told me she wouldn't take me to the hospital because she was afraid my father would lose his job. She said, I'm not taking you because we can't tell them what happened. We can't tell them your dad did this because they will call the police and he will lose his job. And I said, well, he should lose his job. We should call the police. I'm hurt. All I knew is that I couldn't breathe. I wasn't able to breathe very well. I had fractured ribs. When they finally saw me, my mother lied to the hospital and told them that a bookcase had fallen on me. No one asked me. No one in that hospital, that is the same hospital that I've taken my children to for years, asked me as a child or separated me and said, what happened to you? No one asked, so I didn't say anything. I kept it to myself. But I told myself if I got there and someone asked me, you're absolutely right, I was going to say something. No one asked.
So, what? Yeah, that's the problem. They didn't ask back then. So I don't know about now because I haven't been in that situation. But I'm wondering, is there, like, how do we? what needs to change?
Right. I mean, and we say that, but you and I could talk about this until, the cows come home.
Yeah.
It starts with, like small government. It starts with going to the board of those hospitals and explaining to them what's happened over time. I do think it's different now. I do think there's probably a point where it's kind of going the other way. The pendulum is almost too much, right? Where they separate those parents immediately for any little reason, and they start to interrogate, and it's almost too much. But I would rather have too much than not enough, like I experienced, because I had a parent that was not going to help me even when I needed help. So she was too concerned about her well-being. She didn't want to lose her well-being and her way of life, because my dad worked for the major pharmaceutical company in our state, and she didn't want to lose that money. She didn't want to lose that husband. She sacrificed her child because she wanted to have a way of life. And she told me as much when we talked a few months ago. She said, I did what I had to do to survive. And
at the expense of her child.
Of me. And I was the sacrificial lamb. If it wasn't coming her way, she was fine.
So do you ever think do you feel it's too late, or do you ever think that a relationship maybe it can't be the same, but a different type of relationship with your mother? Do you ever think that will happen?
I try not to waste too much thought on it, because if I allow myself to miss her at all, it would probably be too painful. But having said that, when she reached out, she said she was reading self-help books and I'm going to do better. I'm going to be better. But when I asked her, what are you trying to fix? What's wrong? What is broken in your mind? Well, we don't talk. We don't see each other. I want to see you. No, until you acknowledge, and she actually acknowledges that she is part of the abuse, a passive partner that allows the abuse and sees the abuse and doesn't do anything about it, is just as bad as the person that's committing the abuse. And until she sees that, there will be no relationship, and she will never see that. She just won't. She sees herself as a kind, upstanding citizen who's doing things in her town and has friends, and I'm the daughter that's mean and angry and ugly and is out of her life. And she can explain me away, however she wants to explain me away. They didn't live there. They didn't see what I saw. They weren't treated the way I was treated. And until she acknowledges all of that, there's no way to go forward, because I'm not forgetting any of that anymore. I'm not going to act like it didn't happen anymore, like she can. She loves to say, stop living in the past. I don't live in the past. I live in the present, where you need to be accountable for the past. There's a difference. There's a huge difference. I live in the now, and the me in the now will not let you keep treating me like that. So it won't be fixed. It won't. I'm sure she'll resurface. Narcissists resurface. They never go away. And I didn't think my mother was a narcissist when I was very young, because she was his passive partner. She's a narcissist. Mm-hmm. He taught her how to do it. He taught her how to keep that mask. Her mask is on for everyone else. But when she texts me, she calls me a crybaby and tells me she's free and done with me. And what is wrong with you? Why can't you let me love you? And there's something so irretrievably broken in her that I don't think we'll ever be on the same page, unfortunately. And it's sad, because she's so inept and keeps resurfacing and being so terrible, it sort of shoves the whole main culprit into the back of my mind. The guy that abused me my whole life and treated me so terribly and made me feel like I was absolutely worthless a majority of my childhood gets forgotten about, because she can't come forward and really fix herself. It's sad.
Well, You can only do so much. What you can do is just work on you and continue to do the great things that you're doing and to bring awareness to your truth and that this does exist out there, you know?
Do you think you'll ever have a relationship with your mom? A real?
Probably not.
Yeah.
Nah.
Yeah.
I asked because I figured your answer would be the same as mine, and the answer is no. Now, when I do go to family events and if I see her there, I will talk to her. I'll say, "Hi, Mom. How have you been? You look nice today.
Yeah.
All right, I'll talk to you later. I love you." You know, I've got tired of calling and I get no, like I called for the longest time and doesn't. So I asked my cousin, I said, "What's my mom's number?" Because she lives with her. And she was, "Oh, it's this number." And I'm like, "Oh, okay. Just the same one I have." Cool. No problem. Because she knows it's my number. My number's been the same for a minute. So, but no, and that's the sad part because I don't know what it's like to have a sister. I have a sister, but I don't know what that relationship is like to actually have a sister, or a mom.
Right.
And, when I know that my mom, like, she allowed my sister to, like, I'm probably going to get in trouble for this video, but but you guys know it's the truth out there. If y'all are like spying on me, y'all know it's the truth.
To say it's what happened to us. This is our version, right? This is your version of what happened to you.
Yeah. So, she would let my sister call her like all kinds of bad words and cuss at her. And I was like, wait, what? And I would get so mad that I would fight with my sister about it. Like, you don't say that thing, because I've always been still respectful. Towards my mom and all that. But as far as the relationship, no. Now, my oldest daughter tried to have a relationship with her for a while. She did try, and my oldest daughter is very, like, they're all forgiving. My children. Yeah. Well, two of my oldest and my second oldest.
Because you taught them that.
Yeah, they're kind. Very forgiving still, and they still try to. But, they can only do so much. You know what I'm saying? And they, like, the scale shouldn't be this way. It should be this way on both sides. So I think they got tired that the scale was not balanced evenly. And so, but they she tried. My oldest tried for the longest time. And but when they all see each other, "Oh, hi, Grandma. How are you doing?" It's the same thing as I do. We keep it cordial and we move on.
Yeah, you can be civil, but it doesn't mean that you want to hang out with her. Yeah.
Yeah, correct. But Natalie, the book, you need to tell us about this book now again, please. Down the Rabbit Hole of Narcissism, Life Under Attack.
Right. It basically takes up the days after my husband dies. I moved back to Indiana, and I had so many people telling me, like, "We know your life now. Tell us, like, how did you get to this point? What happened?" So I basically take it up the days after Tom dies, and you see a little bit about his funeral, and you see where I progress, and I get right back into those same patterns with those same narcissists. I immediately return back to the people that didn't even really like me, and it starts all up again. You just see that narcissists will not change. They don't have the capacity to change because they don't think there's anything wrong with them. And my father began ignoring me again and ordering me around. And so I decided, you know what? I'm going to let people know what it's like to live with narcissistic parents as an adult and how it continues and how that, the love bombing, the passive aggressive, the triangulation, all of it just continues. And it didn't matter that I was 21 years old with a baby and widowed. It just started right back up. And so I decided to go ahead and let people know what it's like when you live with narcissistic parents as an adult and how they continue to treat you. So the pre-order's out now, and if you just go on Amazon, and I also have the links on my website, NatalieMosleyKlenotic.com. So and it'll be out on June 14th. So we'll see how it does.
All right. And I'll have the links up on this video for everyone as well. Scrolling down at the bottom. I should have done that in the beginning. But I'll add it in there, and we'll go from there. Yeah, I'll add it in there. But I want to thank you, Natalie, so much for coming on and sharing your story. I this is the second time I've had you on a podcast. The first time on my podcast, but I love that you have broken those barriers, that you can talk about this now, and that it's not, don't brush it under the carpet and make it hush hush, because this stuff is real and this stuff does exist, and children are suffering, children are going through some things. So it's good. It's not good that you went through what you went through, but the outcome of what you're doing to positively change and break those, fight the DNA, fighting the DNA. I love it. So, kids out there, children, teenagers, and parents, or a parent or a sibling or somebody that knows something that's going on, like she said, please say something, because this is not a way for a child to live. A child should be a child. They shouldn't have to be the adult and comforting their parents when their parents are, and then putting guilt trips on these children. You guys need to stop that. There is help out there. I don't know how much that's going to work for a narcissist, because again, nothing is ever their fault and nothing is ever wrong, and they are always right, because I've dealt with a narcissist in a relationship before, so I know how that is. You're the bad person. You're the wrong person. You're the one that don't know what the hell you're talking about. They are always right.
Right. And breaking those cycles is not for the weak. It's not easy. So
not.
Your family's scapegoat or black sheep, there's something right about being that person. If you are that scapegoat, it's because you're standing up to it. So good for you.
Yeah, good. All right. Well, there you have it, folks. Natalie's story, and her book is already, you can pre-order her book, Down the Rabbit Hole of Narcissism, Life Under NARC Attack, or go to Amazon. I'll have the links up here for you guys. Well, Natalie, I'd like to welcome you to the Unhinged, a Mary Blige show. Until the next conversation. Thank you, Natalie.
Much.
The Unhinged, where nothing is hidden. We talking so getting.
Listen.
The Unhinged, where nothing is hidden. We talking so getting.
Listen.
Mary, blah.
Show.
Mary, blah.
Show.
The Unhinged, where nothing is hidden. We talking so getting.
Listen.
The Unhinged, where nothing is hidden. We talking so getting.
Listen.
Mary, blah.
Show.
Mary, blah.
Show.
Welcome